Happy July 16, 2023. Happy Sunday. We're happy to have all of you here with us as we are starting a topic you probably haven't heard of or had much to investigate on. So we have a gentleman here, Hereditary Chief Phil Lane Jr. He is an enrolled member of the Tonwan, Dakota, and Chickasaw nations, and is an internationally recognized leader in human, community, and economic development. During the past 50 years, Chief Lane has worked with Indigenous peoples from the Americas, Micronesia, Southeast Asia, China, Hawaii, India, Africa. He served 16 years as an associate professor at the Faculty of Education at the University of Lethbridge, Alberta, Canada, between 1980 to 1996. In 1982, Chief Lane co-founded the Four Worlds International Institute. With Indigenous elders and spiritual leaders, Phil is also a chairman of Four Directions International and Compassion Games International. Chief Lane has been the recipient of multiple awards and recognition. He was the first Indigenous person to win the prestigious WinStar Award, presented annually on behalf of the late John Denver and the WinStar Foundation. In 2000, he received the Year 2000 Award for Freedom and Human Rights, awarded by the Swiss Foundation. Other award winners include Nobel Prize winner Wangari Maathai, the Dalai Lama, Lord Yehudi Menuhin, Jacques Yves, YVES, sorry if I didn't pronounce that right, Cousteau, Jacques Yves Cousteau, and Yevgeny Velikhov, Vice President, Soviet Academy of Sciences. In 2008, Chief Lane received the Ally Award presented by the Center for Healing Racism. Particularly emphasis for this award was for his dedicated work for more than 19 years as one of the key Indigenous leaders in the resolution of Canada's residential school issue, which involved the sexual, physical, cultural, psychological, and emotional abuse of thousands of Aboriginal children in Canada. This process resulted in more than a $4 billion settlement for residential school survivors. So in August 15, 1992, recognizing his hereditary lineage of leadership and longtime service to Indigenous peoples and the human family, Indigenous elders from across North America recognized Phil as a hereditary chief of the Hinhan, Wicasa, and Deloria Teospace of the Ihanktonwan Nation through a traditional headdress ceremony. Chief Lane is a member of the American Indian Science and Engineering Society Council of Elders. He is the host of the Shift Network's Global Indigenous Wisdom Summits. Chief Lane is also an honorary international advisor to the Help Foundation of the Beijing Women's and Children's Development Foundation and the co-founder and global trustee of the United Religions Initiative. There is so much more that I can explain about the history of what this gentleman here has done to assist in healing wounds that the world has. I can say a lot more, and I welcome you to take a look at this giant bio, which is a lot more that you'll read, which is amazing, by the way, at clearwaterbaha'is.org, www.clearwaterbaha'is.org. We have the bio for Hereditary Chief Phil Lane Jr. And I'll just end with this piece about his bio. On International Earth Day, April 22nd, 2016, 4 world staff were honored to be invited by the Mesoamerican Alliance to participate with Indigenous peoples globally at parallel events surrounding the signing of the Paris Climate Change Agreement at the UN. the United Nations International Earth Day. After 7 years of consultation and refinement across the Americas, the International Treaty for Protecting and Restoring Mother Earth was signed in New York City, simultaneous to the signing of the Paris Climate Change Accord. For all of you that didn't know about it, there's another international treaty for protecting and restoring Mother Earth. It was signed in New York City, simultaneous to the signing of the Paris Climate Change Accord. So we spoke a lot about this development across the world and how our speaker here has taken part in it. This week's topic is prophecies, dynamic change, and a new global civilization. Indigenous representatives across the Americas, Indonesia, and the allies of the human family signed this international treaty. Signing ceremonies of this international treaty are now unfolding everywhere on Mother Earth, including Brazil and New Zealand. During the past 4 years, a primary focus of 4 World's work in North America with First Nations tribes and allies has been stopping the expansion of the Alberta tar sands, related pipelines, and tankers. This work includes supporting direct action, developing international treaties between Indigenous nations, and researching and publishing the critical state of Mother Earth. With this effort now fulfilled, 4 Worlds is dedicated to those solutions that restore the health and well-being of Mother Earth and the human family. These international treaties between Indigenous nations, including the International Treaty to Protect the Sacred from Tar Sands Projects in 2013, and the International Treaty to Protect the Salish Sea in September 2014. These international treaties are bound together with the Save the Fraser Declaration, December 2010. Together, they unite over 200 First Nations and tribes across Canada and the USA. So there's a lot of goals and priorities between 2015 and 2010, educational goals, capacity building, environmental. We have here just a little snippet. If you want to look again at clearwaterbaha'is.org, you can see quite a bit. And Hereditary Chief Phil Lane Jr. will be talking a bit on how his work with his people around the world, that is the human family, expanding the definition of what it is to be human, all of us working together to solve the world's problems, and how that relates to the prophecies of the Native Americans. And of course, every tribe really has their own prophecies. Talking about this today, we're going to be exploring together. We're not going to cover everything. We're just going to start something to get us interested in learning more. With that being said, we welcome you, Phil. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Last week, we had a little introduction. We're happy to have you now. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, John. I really, really appreciated being invited to come, as well as the work you went through in uploading various documents that I think people will find very helpful. I may like to begin with a prayer. O Tekashlawakantaka, Creator of the universe, most beloved one, all powerful one, most kind one, most compassionate one, O Ancient of Days, O Blessed Beauty, we call upon your holy power at this time to infuse into our souls and beings your divine revelation of oneness, of unity, of a new global civilization. We call upon all those tribes and nations of the East to come together in unity and harmony, in kindness and compassion. All the tribes and nations of the East, from where comes the red sunrise, to come together where that yellow sun hangs at high noon, to come together from the south, and to the west, from where comes thunder, lightning, and rain and darkness. We call upon all those tribes and nations to come together in unity and harmony. To the north, from where comes the cleansing white snow, to purify our hearts and minds, we call upon all those tribes and nations to come together. And we give thanksgiving to all the qualities of Father Sky, all those masculine qualities of life. We ask that, and ask forgiveness, that these masculine qualities have brought us almost to the brink of destruction. and we humble ourselves before our beloved Mother Earth and all those female qualities of life. And we ask, Creator, that the abuse of women might end forever upon this Mother Earth, for they are the representatives of our Mother Earth. Until the abuse of women stops, the abuse of Mother Earth will not stop. And we ask, Creator, for us to understand that the eagle of humanity, the hummingbird of humanity, the quetzal of humanity, and the eagle of humanity have two wings. One is man and one is woman. Until both wings of that eagle have equal power and respect, the eagle, the condor, the quetzal, and the hummingbird will never fly to its promised destiny. Oh my God, unite the hearts of thy servants and reveal unto them thy great purpose. May they follow thy commandments and abide in thy law. Help them, O God, in their endeavor, and grant them strength to serve thee. O God, lead them not in themselves, but guide their steps to the light of knowledge, and cheer their hearts by thy love. Verily, thou art their helper and their Lord. Well, my beloved relatives, I'm so happy to be able to be here and join you and to share prophecies, dynamic change, and a new global civilization, the role of the indigenous people of the Americas, Pacific Islands, and Aotearoa. And this gives you a little bit of my background. Back in 1967, I'd hit my bottom. I'd gone from being the U.S. Canadian wrestling champ at my weight class at 157 at the big exposition they had in Canada for the 100th year celebration there, and down the tube. I mean, down the tube. Alcohol, drugs, unhealthy relationships. I'd fight it at a drop of a hat. And in the depths of my despair, I went to see a friend, and he had a huge library. And I picked up this one book. I had no idea what it was. And I opened it up to a page. And these are the words I begin to read. He is the King, the all-knowing, the wise. Lo, the nightingale of paradise singeth upon the twigs of the tree of eternity with holy and sweet melodies. And you know how the tablet of Akbak continues. When I encountered that tablet, my body caught on fire, literally, and started burning away all this hurt and pain. And by the way, it's not all gone. So I'm not any kind of perfect saint or anything like that. But my life was dramatically changed. And I had no idea. I had no idea where this came from. I had no idea. And in fact, I didn't even know when somebody said, we're going to take you over. And I said, what is this? They said, this is a Baha'i. I said, well, I want to be one of those Baha'is. And so that's began my journey. And it eventually carried me in 1971 to Bolivia. And what was happening, I was coaching and teaching at Walla Walla Community College. And I saw this picture of the indigenous people in Bolivia. At that time, there was a move to have our spiritual teachers of the faith travel in the world. And I knew that I had to go there. So sure enough, we arrived on March 21st, 1970. And from here, I'm going to begin my presentation. What happened was yesterday I got inspired and put together a slide presentation. Now, here we go. Let's see. Where it should be. I'm able to see it right here. Hang on. I'll be darned. I had that right there. Files. No. Oh, Google Drive. Can you see this, by the way? Can you see me going into Google Drive?
No, so you'll have to, there's a green button that says share screen. Once you open up your PowerPoint or your keynote, then you hit the share screen and you should be able to pull the application up.
So I got the share screen. I'm going up, but here we go. Oh no, okay, sign in, I guess. Okay. I'll be darned. I'll be darned. Okay. It's just not. Oh, here we go. You see this?
So you still have to activate on Zoom. There's a green button at the bottom of your screen.
Yeah.
You have to hit that button.
Okay, here we go. Green button at the bottom of my screen.
It says share screen.
Yeah, I know. I thought I had this all worked out. What I will have to do here is to go here and I will pull this up. I thought I had this all just so perfect. But sometimes you think you're dead right, you're dead wrong. So here, alrighty. So I'm going to go right here to slides, bring it up on the screen. Okay, here we go. I've got that. I'll go down here. Darn, okay. I'll go here and share the screen. Darn it. Huh. I'm getting it in my Google Doc.
So how about you just send that link to me and I can open it up and share it.
Okay, perfect. And I'll have you put the screen here. Okay. Can't believe this. I'll tell you what, can I just put it in the link?
Yes, that would be fine.
Okay, great. All righty.
Just send it to Clearwater Bahá'ís.
Okay, got it.
Click on me.
Okay. And you'll open it up and make the presentation. Thank you so much. Okay. Copy link. Okay. There we go.
So while that's going on, we welcome all of you to find materials that we're referring to that could be related to the PowerPoint, could be related to the subject that our speakers share with us. It's posted on clearwaterbaha'is.org. You're able to find it under the topic of discussion for the week.
Oh, I see. For some reason, I can't access the file. It won't.
Is it the file you sent us earlier today? The one that was in.
No, it's a PowerPoint. So it says when I try to put it on there, access to file restricted by account admin.
Yeah, so the account admin is the one who owns the.
Yeah, so if you would actually just email that to me, that would be the best thing.
I really appreciate it. I think what's happened is I've somehow gotten into my son's presentation. Hang on.
Yeah, so that would be fixed by going to the profile settings and the Google account.
Yeah, here we go. No problem. That's what happened. Okay, here we go. I'm going to just send it to Jeremiah. Savine?
Yes, please.
Perfect. Thank you, Jeremiah. And I'll know a lot better how to do that.
So yeah, while they're talking about that, clearwaterbaha'is.org. Also, there's a Facebook page, the Baha'i Center of Clearwater. Also, you can go to the YouTube channel, Clearwater Bahá'ís. The YouTube channel is a nice place to visit. We have quite a few different topics. Actually, before everyone shares their screen while they're getting that going, you can all see this. So this is the bio for today. You can all see that.
Okay, now I put it, by the way, it's in the chat now. It's in everybody can see it. If you can pull it out of there, we've got it.
So yeah, Jeremiah, tell me when you're sharing your screen. Anyway, for anyone that's interested, the downloadable materials and resources, you can find them here at the end. The hyperlinks that were posted here at the end of the topic summary. You can see it's a little more lengthy than how we typically have it, and a lot more to look at in terms of materials to review. And here we go.
Yeah, put it to the slide presentation. If you would.
Right now, this is all it's showing. I can exit full screen.
Yeah, there should be a way to
Slideshow, top right, top right, top right.
here, top right. There we go. Okay, all righty. So prophecies, dynamic change, and a new global civilization. The global destiny of the indigenous people of the Americas, the Pacific Islands, and Aotearoa. The reason I've added the Pacific Islands and Aotearoa, although there is different opinions about did the indigenous people of the Americas travel across the Pacific to New Zealand, or was it a migration that came the other? The reason I'm saying that because it fits directly into the prophecy I'll share next from Abdu'l-Bahá. But in traveling to Aotearoa and traveling across the Pacific Islands, I heard directly from indigenous people that in fact they have memories, and we have memories of these journeys. I met a gentleman, his name was Thor Heyerdahl, who led the Kon-Tiki expedition back in the early 50s, in which they built a balsam raft of 9 balsam logs, and they were able to travel from the Americas across the Pacific Islands to Tahiti, in that area, which would have been then the ability to travel on to Aotearoa. And so, according to relatives I met in Maori relatives I met in Aotearoa, they have records. They have records of when they traveled from the Americas across the Pacific to Aotearoa that they have kept in memory. And so at that time, we were called the older brothers and they were called the younger brothers. Next tablet, next slide, please. This is the prophecy of Abdu'l-Bahá. And I want to say that there's a quote I read into it, said, "Every letter proceeding from our mouth is endowed with such a regenerative power as it to enable it to bring into existence a new creation, a creation, the magnitude of which is inscrutable to all save God," from the Ancient of Days. I say that because when this prophecy is given, next slide, on April 8th, 1916, in the garden outside the Shrine of Baha'u'llah, and addressed the Baha'is of the United States and Canada, which is so important. Anybody who is a historian, a scholar, who knew anything about what was happening with indigenous people would have said this was complete and total insanity. There was this whole statement, the vanishing American. Because at that time, we were going through some of the most darkest times in our history. Next, please. Now, in fact, go back one. I want to take the time so you'll see why these next slides contribute. Go back, if you would, to that one slide. Okay, before that. Attach great importance to the indigenous population of America. And by the way, that was clarified by question Universal House of Justice member. Does that mean the entire Americas? Yes. For these souls may be likened unto the ancient inhabitants of the Arabian Peninsula, who prior to the mission of Muhammad were seen as savages. When the light of Muhammad showed forth in their midst, however, they became so radiant as to illumine the world. Likewise, these Indians, should they be educated and guided, there is no doubt they will become so illumined as to enlighten the world. And the word enlighten when you look it up in any dictionary, it's not just enlightenment spiritually, it also means intellectually. That is a claim, next slide, that was made, as I share, April 8th, 1916. Anybody hearing this would have said this is completely insanity. Next, please. Now, in this comparison to what's happening today, these are just some of the contribution of our Arab relatives. The advancements in science and knowledge, incredible. The art and architecture still is here with us today. Our Arab relatives preserved classical knowledge from traditions everywhere on Mother Earth. Their systems of banking and trade were across thousands of miles. Their educational institutions were set up the best in the world at that time. They had their teaching of social justice and charity that it transcended anything known in the world until that time. Religious tolerance, if you look at especially that period between 800 and 1400, was tremendous. If your wife was married to someone who was Jewish, married to a Muslim woman was married, or you were married to a Jewish woman, you would contribute to their temple. The same as you would do to a Christian, you would contribute to their church. Religious tolerance, humanitarian values, and also teachings about protecting the earth, about conserving and not wasting. So in this prophecy, it says that they shall become so illumined, they shall enlighten the world. And they talked about how, again, to see what happened to those who were considered savages and what happened. Next, please. The radiance of Islam literally brought about Europe's Renaissance. The brilliance of their Islamic scientific and artistic achievements transformed Europe from the Dark Ages to the Renaissance. Now, this is quite a statement, but the spiritual foundation of Islam is the source of all innovations that we see today technologically. Mathematics, algebra, when you see the incredible science and knowledge brought forth by the Islamic scholars and scientists and so forth, they are without Islam, there would be not the technology, the developments we have in the world today. Please, next. Now, what I'd like to do is look at the Tablets of the Divine Plan, Indigenous Prophecies, and Latter-day Saints. The Tablets of the Divine Plan and their promise for Indigenous people. We have that. Also, Black Elk, the great Lakota visionary, Heakasapa. He has direct prophecies, have direct meaning to each and every one of us. And then there was many prophecies across the Americas that I had the opportunity to personally meet the Indigenous people from whence they came. Next, please. Now, in the Doctrine and Covenants, the Book of Mormon, revealed by Prophet Joseph Smith to Sidney Rigdon, Parley, Pratt, and Lehman Copley at Kirkland, Ohio, was May 7th, 1831. And in this, now their term of Indigenous people, we would call Indigenous as Lamanites. But before the great day of the Lord shall come, Jacob shall flourish in the wilderness, and the Lamanites shall blossom as a rose. Now, that prophecy, by the way, that the Indigenous people would blossom like the rose, that would have been another, people think something that people would not understand. Zion shall flourish upon the hills and rejoice upon the mountains, and shall be assembled together in the place which I appointed, which was talking about the state of Utah, which, by the way, is the most advanced state in the Union of the United States in terms of what it's been able to do. And as well, because of this, there's been a tremendous support and interest of the LDS Church in Indigenous people, not only across the Americas, but across the Pacific and clear to Aotearoa. Next, please. And then we come to Black Elk. Then I was standing on the highest mountain of them all, and round beneath me was a whole hoop of the world. And while I stood there, I saw more than I could tell, understood more than I saw. For I saw in a sacred manner the shapes of all things in the spirit, and the shapes of all shapes, they must live together like one. Next. And I saw the sacred hoop of my people was one of many hoops that made one circle, wide as daylight and starlight. In the center grew one mighty flowering tree to shelter all the children of one mother and one father. And I saw that it was holy. Then as I stood there, two men were coming from the east, flying headfirst, flying like arrows, and between them rose the daybreak star. They came and gave me an herb to me and said, with this on earth you shall undertake anything and do it. Next. It was the daybreak star herb, the herb of understanding, and they told me to drop it upon the earth. I saw it falling far. When it struck Mother Earth, it rooted, grew, flowered, 4 blossom, 1 stem, a black, a white, a red, a scarlet, or black, red, and a yellow. The rays from these streamed upward to the heavens so that all the creatures saw it, and no place was there darkness. Hakasapa, Black Elk, Ogala, Lakota, Ocheti, Shikoan. So I encountered this prophecy when I was very young. And I always wondered, who are these two men coming flying like the east, like arrows, that brought the message that through symbolically to me, they brought the daybreak star herb with black, white, red, and yellow stems. And that's what's encouraged me, in fact, to travel to all those parts of the world that symbolically represent those you might say colors, to Europe, to Africa, across Asia, across the Americas, because I knew that this was talking about the hoop of many hoops, the coming together of a new global civilization. Next, please. Indigenous prophecies like Black Elk clearly foretell the advent of a hoop of many hoops, in which all nations, races, creeds, and classes are solely and permanently united in the understanding of the prior unity and oneness of our human family and all life. The prior unity meaning that we've always been human. We've always been, each of us, a sacred, a sovereignty, ancient, imperishable, everlasting. We all came from the same source. Next, please. These prophecies of the Americas include the 2012 Mayan prophecies, the reunion of the Condor and Eagle, the 8th Council Fire, the return of the White Buffalo, the prophecies of Black Elk, the Peacemaker, Quetzalcoatl, Sweet Meadows, Handsome Lake, the Hopi, and many others. So these are just a spectrum of the sacred prophecies you can find across the Americas. And each, by the way, was revealed uniquely, just like the prophecy of the reunion of the Condor and Eagle, that was revealed even prior to the Incas. In Tiwanaku, the community, which was one of the communities prior to the Incas, that was their prophecy. Just like up here in the north, the prophecy of Black Elk, they were unknown to each other until we begin to travel across the Americas, begin to see how these fit together, kind of like a beautiful tapestry. Please, next. And they speak of this new global civilization. Now, people can interpret these in different ways, but the way I see it is a new day and a new global civilization that emphasize unity, justice, understanding of oneness, rejecting notions of domination, division, and superiority. Next. Now, it's important to ask ourselves, there's a beautiful beautiful quote in the hidden words, in the Persian hidden words. It says, you remember when we were all gathered beneath the sacred tree of life and we gave you these 3 counsels? Well, we can see 200 million years ago that all the land was connected. So literally, right in the heart there, we look at Africa and then look at Ethiopia, which is in the top part. We know, and in fact, I traveled there, we call it the place of origin. From best we can understand, that's where we emerged. So that the fact that we are all united is clear. Now, then you see today, here's what the world looks like on this side of Mother Earth. If you look at the other side of Mother Earth, it's practically all blue. It's all ocean, meaning that there was one piece of land. It separated, it's called the continental drift theory, but it only separated on one side of the Earth. You can see the other one's almost, I was going to put a slide up there, but I couldn't get it up there. It's completely blue. Next. Realization, recognition, awakening to the truth of being one human family is what's happening. Embracing unity and diversity, eliminating prejudice, promoting equality. Next. Fulfilling the sacred prophecies. So the prophecy of the reunion of the Condor and the Eagle was fulfilled between March 21st, 1970 to July 9th, 1971, beginning in Sucre, Bolivia, ending on July 9th at Lake Titicaca, Bolivia. And myself and 16 Quechuas traveled. I had arrived in Sucre. Little did I know that I was the eagle that was prophesied coming from the north. We arrived in Sucre and they began mentoring me for 16 months. I traveled through those mountains till finally when I was down in Santa Cruz, which I had to leave Sucre because my wife was brutally raped there. And we were told after the trial was over and all these crazy things happened to move down to Santa Cruz, Bolivia. And of course, she eventually had to go home because of the tremendous trauma she went through. And I remember so clearly, I was standing in front one morning, just got out of the shower. I was looking in the mirror and all of a sudden I knew we had to go to Lake Titicaca. And we did go. We had a convention going in La Paz. 16 Quechuas from Sucre came with me. They hadn't returned there for 400 years because of the invasion of the Spanish. But we left the Bahá'í Center about 3 a.m. in the morning. We walked down a long path on foot to where all the trucks are loaded, and we left for Lake Titicaca on the back of this old truck. I had a bunch of grain in it and arrived with the 16 Quechuas and another dear brother who was there with me, Rich Hutchinson. And we had saved $16. We had a little bit, a tiny bit of it for food. And sure enough, we went across, we got a boat, went across to the Island of the Sun. And I'll never forget when we arrived there, the Quechuas who were with us, literally the elders, kissed the earth because it had been prophesied that this would happen. So we went and prayed at very, very key places of the Isle of the Sun. And we went by and prayed at the Isle of the Moon. And that evening we went to the royal seat of the Incas. And it's the most beautiful place carved out of solid stone. I'll never forget that night. It was the 9th of July, 1971. It was almost right there. You can tell the difference, right there at full moon. And when you're up at 13,000 feet, and the stars are just stunning. As I sat there and prayed, and they gave me the honor to sit in the seat of the Inca, and then they sat down kind of cascading seats, and we prayed so strongly. And as I was sitting there, I could feel the rustling of the indigenous people awakening across the Americas. And if you know how locusts take off, it's a very simple process. Just one locust begins to brush their wings against the other locusts, and before you know it, almost instantaneously, the entire millions of locusts take off. And of course, we know they began traveling as this huge swarm. I felt that. And so since that time, July 1971, my question was, how do we unite the indigenous people, the Americas, because the prophecies said when that happens, when the eagle and condor meet, it will be the cause eventually of all the indigenous people across the Americas coming together in unity. Now, to give a little bit of understanding of this, when Columbus arrived, it was about between 100 to 108 million indigenous people living across the Americas. Because of genocide, but primarily disease that was brought, that population was reduced to about 15 or 20 million. Today, there's 80 million indigenous people across the Americas who still are living in our land and still speaking their own language, only of which, of that 80 million, only about 8 or 9 million live north of the US border in Canada, the United States. So for 52 years, we began to travel. And of course, we went to Central America. And in Central America, they had no condors and eagles. At first, we thought were going to be the jaguar. It was going to be the boa, but emerged from the indigenous people themselves in Central America, their bird as the quetzal. And then when in 2012, we began really working with our relatives down in the Amazon, which actually began in Bolivia, where we began sharing these prophecies back in 1970 through 71. Emerged from there that although they have different sacred birds, the hummingbird was their symbol. So literally on March 21st, 2023, the union of the condor, hummingbird, quetzal, and eagles was established at Palenque, Mexico, through a process we went through, and the first council was elected at that point, utilizing, which you'll find in the details, a nonpartisan, non-political way of doing elections, which we know about, but adapted to the context we're dealing with. And it's so amazing that it turned out there's 13 members of this council, 7 women, 6 men. By the way, that's another sacred number for the Mayans and for our indigenous people, 13 for the 13 months, and representing indigenous people from each of these of the condor, hummingbird, quetzal, and eagle there. And then as well, instead of having one chairperson, 2 what we call hosts were selected, 2 wonderful, wonderful relatives, both from Mexico, because it was logical. Mexico has the largest numbers of indigenous people in the Americas, about 25 million indigenous people. So we have this young man and more of a kind of older sister come and facilitating. But we then wanted to select the timing. When would we first have our first union council meeting? And I had no idea. I had not related July 9th, 2023 to this. But everybody decided that was the date. So this past Sunday, on July 9th, 2023, exactly to the day, 52 years later, that we went to Lake Titicaca, the first council meeting was held for 4 hours, almost 4 hours, right? And of course, 52 is the number of years in the Mayan cycle. So it begins saying we're starting a brand new cycle. Now, this prophecy promises when the indigenous people of the Americas come together and they begin to unite, and that's what our purpose is, to provide an alternative to the system, just like in alignment with what the faith is working on, that this would also help to bring about the unification of the entire human family. So the fulfillment of these sacred prophecies is about unifying the human family, ending war and beginning peace on earth, and the establishment of the lesser peace. And this is what I think is very important for us to reflect on. We know the lesser peace is not going to be established by Baha'is or Christians or Muslims or our beloved Hindu relatives or Zoroastrian relatives or many other beautiful faiths, the Sikhs. It's going to be established by the peoples of the world. It talks about the governments of the world, but it's going to take the peoples of the world to establish the lesser peace. Now, if it's true, which I believe with all my heart and soul, to the bottom of my essence, that what these prophecies promised in the tablets of the divine plan and others, that the indigenous people, and we can see it happening today, are rising up, and some of those of many different faiths, many different faiths are rising up. And as they rise, we can see the rest of the colonial systems collapsing. So I believe, without question, that indigenous peoples of the Americas, whatever faith they might be, have a tremendous role in playing in establishing the lesser peace. Next slide, please. So we know the indigenous people of America hold great significance. They are like the ancient inhabitants of the Arabian Peninsula before the mission of Muhammad, who were perceived as savages, but yet we can see what in fact came from the light of Muhammad when it was transformed. It transformed the Arabian Peninsula inhabitants in the world. Holistic education and wise guidance are illuminating the indigenous souls of America, and likewise. We can all illumine the world by understanding and supporting indigenous enlightenment. We all can illumine the world by understanding and supporting indigenous enlightenment. Next, please. Unleashing the promise of indigenous people of America. Culturally respectful and community-based education is vital. Again, we will become radiant and illumine the world by supporting and empowering indigenous people through education, physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, and volitionally. So important to remember again, this tablet revealed outside Baha'u'llah's residence was directed specifically to the Baha'is of Canada and the United States. The value of indigenous cultures, wisdom, and history will support our enlightenment and global contributions. And I say I'm talking about all of us, all members of the human family. Please, next. Embracing the spiritual destiny of indigenous people. And it's so important to know that at this time in human history, we all are making a contribution. Without, for instance, the technology we have, the digital technology we have, we couldn't be at this stage to unite indigenous people across the Americas and unite us as a human family. In fact, back in 1975, there was a group of young men and myself who were seeking out elders. And we heard of these two elders, Abe Burnstick and Eddie Belrose, who brought the first Inikaka, the first sweat lodge to Sweat House Lodge outside of Corvallis, Oregon, where they're using our sweat lodge to heal alcoholism. And they shared many prophecies. And so we went to listen to these prophecies. Many of them are coming true already. Some are still coming true, but one that really caught my mind is, and they said this: someday, you young men are going to see the everywhere spirit made physically manifest on the earth. That's the best way I can explain it. And when that day comes, you're going to be able to look in front of you, and you're going to be able to see people from the other side of Mother Earth and talk to them. They describe in detail the coming of digital technology, the coming of the internet. Contributing to a new era of unity, justice, and global enlightenment. The illumination, enlightenment of the indigenous people of America is a shared responsibility between all of us, because this prophecy was given to all. We share spiritual brilliance by supporting the importance of culturally respectful and community-based education. Next, please. Understanding and supporting indigenous spiritual and cultural development will further enhance and hasten their destiny and illumination worldwide. So I think it's really important, whatever territories you live in, to understand who live there, to give acknowledgement of that. We wrote a book called The Sacred Tree back in 1985. It's been translated in many languages, and it really takes the essence of these spiritual teachings that indigenous people are sharing with the world, and you'll find how they completely reflect the Blessed Beauty's teachings. Contributing to a new era of unity, justice, and global enlightenment. So again, this slide shows put together, so I can see where a lot of things I need to edit, but together, let's look towards a future where Indigenous people of America become a beacon of enlightenment for the world, as prophesied by Abdu'l-Baha in the Tablets of the Divine Plan. Next, please. Okay, now what does that new global civilization look like? Next. These prophecies are firmly and unshakably rooted in the spiritual understanding consciousness of the oneness of the human family and all life. From this spiritual understanding and consciousness naturally unfolds these realizations. Naturally, if you think about it. Next. The equality of men and women, the balancing of the streams of wealth and poverty, the elimination of all prejudices, essential unity and harmony of science, universal education. Continue, please. The independent investigation of truth and unity and diversity. A new global civilization where the voices, wisdom, and vision of Indigenous people are justly and respectfully represented, and whose ancient wisdom is finally heard and truly acted upon. Next, please. This hoop of hoops will be manifested when there's a shared commitment to placing the common good ahead of any national, ethnic, religious, or self-interest. The hoop of many hoops is a new global civilization that ensures the autonomy of each of its representative members, as well as completely safeguarding the personal freedom and initiative of all the individuals that compose them. Next, please. The vision of all these prophecies is that a new global civilization is inevitable. This new global civilization, the process of emerging, found in the unshakable consciousness of the oneness of humankind and all life, a spiritual truth that all the human sciences confirm. Anthropology, physiology, and psychologically recognize only one human family, although infinitely varied in the secondary aspects of life, or our genetics. Next, please. The full recognition of this fundamental truth requires the abandonment of all prejudice of every kind, race, class, sexual orientation, color, creed, species, nationality, gender, degrees of material wealth, everything that encourages people to consider themselves superior or inferior to others. Abandoning all prejudice is a great spiritual challenge and a requirement for every one of us, for all of us at this critical time. Next. The full consciousness, acceptance of the oneness of the human family is a fundamental prerequisite for the reorganization and administration of the world as one, the home of humankind and all life. Universal acceptance and realization of the spiritual principle are essential to any successful attempt to establish peace on earth. Next, please. The spiritual reality of the oneness of our human family should therefore be universally proclaimed, taught in every school, affirmed in every nation as a preparation for fundamental changes in how nation states function and the systemic structures of our unfolding global society. World peace will only be achieved when the spiritual reality of the oneness of all life is realized. Next. This global civilization as visualized, and it's so important, we can talk about a new global, but what does it look like? A new global governing system, rooted locally, organized and scaled bioregionally, and synchronized globally is emerging. The members of this new global governing system must be elected in a non-partisan, principle-centered manner. Next, please. The extremes of wealth and poverty will be balanced with a spiritual moral understanding that every human being has the fundamental right to clean water to drink, healthy food to eat, health care, adequate housing, universal education, and freedom of worship and expression. Next, please. Science and spirituality, the two most potent forces in human life, will really be reconciled, will cooperate, and will harmoniously develop. And as an example, the manifestation of this prophecy has been unfolding for more than 40 years in the work of the American Indian Science and Engineering Society, ASIS, in which my parents were founding elders, and I'm also on the Elders Council. Next, please. The press under this global system, while giving full scope to the expression of the diversified views and convictions of humanity, will cease to be manipulated by vested interests, whether private or public. The press will be liberated from the influence of contending governments and peoples, and we can see today, without question, how needed this is. It is so needed. People today don't know where to look for the truth. And as we know, that's one of the greatest oppressions we can have. is wanting to find the truth and not wanting to find it. Next, please. The economic resource of Mother Earth will be organized for the welfare of all members of the human family and all life, will ensure its sources of natural materials will be sustainably, harmoniously developed and fully utilized without waste, which, by the way, was another key teaching that the relatives, the Arab relatives brought to the world, this idea of not wasting. Its markets will be coordinated and developed. Next, please. The distribution of its products and service will be equitably regulated. Destitution on the one hand and gross accumulation of ownership on the other will disappear by choice, because peoples will be transformed spiritually. They'll understand their responsibility to our human family. National rivalries and prejudice will be replaced by racial amity, understanding, cooperation. Next, please. Racial, religious, and ethnic animosities, rivalries, hatred, and intrigues will cease. The enormous resources, energy dissipated and wasted on conflict, economic, political, armed, will be dedicated to extending the range of scientific inventions and technological developments, the increase in the productivity of humankind, and exterminating disease. Next, please. Scientific research will be devoted to raising the standard of physical and systemic health, the harmonization, integration, and optimization of the human brain, the prolongation of human life in an ethical manner. Next, please. This new global civilization is not a new world order where the extremely wealthy or a secret elite enslave most of humanity for their own selfish purposes, selfish and greedy purposes. This new global civilization is neither a new world order where everybody is forced to look, act, and think the same, nor is a new world order dominated by any nation state, nor is a new world order created by Antichrist before an Armageddon arrives. Next, please. The ecologically sustainable development of the unused and unsuspected resources of Mother Earth. This will happen, and is happening. The furtherance of any other agency that can stimulate the intellectual, moral, cultural, artistic, and spiritual life of all members of our human family. In summary, these prophecies foretell the following. Next, please. A global civilization where life-enhancing indigenous cultural, spiritual wisdom, teachings, sacred ceremony, and medicines, prophecies, and profound understanding of our Mother Earth's natural laws will help to enlighten and illumine all members of our human family. Next, please. A global civilization that blends and embodies the ideals of both East and West, liberated from the curse of war and its misery, and focused on the sustainable, harmonious development of all the available sources of clean energy on the surface of Mother Earth. A global governance system where force is the servant of justice and rooted in love and compassion, all life is sustained by the universal recognition of one creator. Next, please. A new global civilization which indigenous people and other religious prophecies speak of is not to be confused even remotely with a tyrannical new world order, often fearfully alluded to by various contending sources. I think this is really important because as we talk about this new global civilization, somehow people kind of have conspiracies about what that can be. But I'm going to be real clear that what our indigenous prophecies speak about, what we know the Ancient of Days speaks about, Abdu'l Baha speaks about, Shoghi Effendi speaks about, Universal House of Justice speaks about, is not this. Next, please. The new global civilization that is even now unfolding is based on the full spiritual recognition of the oneness of the human family and all life, and is promised by spiritual teachers and faith traditions everywhere on Mother Earth. Next. The spiritual foundation of the indigenous worldview is the prior unity and oneness of our human family and all life. Therefore, all members of our human family are part of the sacred circle of life. Since all members of the human family are part of the sacred circle of life, we are all indigenous people of our Mother Earth. Next, please. As well, every human being is born of this physical plane of time and space, is a sovereignty, ancient, imperishable, and everlasting, and is fully responsible for the well-being of one another, for all life, and for doing our very best in manifesting this new global civilization. We are the ones we have been waiting for. Now, we can close there. And take the slide down. Okay. So thank you for bearing with. Thank you for bearing through this slideshow I just put together last night with the help of my son. Please, any questions people may have. Any thoughts, questions, comments?
There is one in the comments right now on the Zoom chat.
Yes.
It says, owning that prophecy many times can only be understood after a passage of time. How should we regard people who prophesy in our time? For example, spend any time on YouTube. Eventually, you will hear all manner of prophecy.
Well, it's just like the prophecy of the reign of the Condor and Eagle. When we had our gathering at Palenque, an elder was sent from Palenque, sent from Tiwanaku to say, we want our prophecy understood clearly. So yes, there's many prophecies. But what I've found is the indigenous prophecies across the Americas are like a beautiful weaving of a beautiful blanket, so to speak, that fits directly in to those prophecies that we all have. The world's been given, not only by the Ancient of Days, but also by other sacred teachers everywhere on Mother Earth of all faiths have prophesied this coming of peace on earth, the lesser peace, which I believe that indigenous people will play a tremendous role in all members of our human family and all of us, because we know that Shoghi Effendi was very clear that the Baha'is aren't going to be the ones that lead a major part of the lesser peace. It talks about the governments of the world coming together and ending war. But also, with all this craziness going on, it's we, the people, that have to really come together in unity in a good way. And our elders tell us this, we need to stand in our strength, our spiritual strength, and move to the positive alternative we wish to create without giving away our energy fighting the negative. And this is what I'm seeing happen. There's no other peoples on the face of Mother Earth who have set aside war and conflict as the indigenous people of the Americas. We're across the whole Americas. We have the same four directions. We have the same basic spiritual teachings that completely fit into this idea of oneness. The hurt of one is the hurt of all. The healing, the upliftment, the honor is the healing upliftment of one, is the honor, healing, and upliftment of all. So I hope that somewhat touched that question. Any others, please? And just share them verbally. You don't have to put them in the chat. But if you'd like to do it by the chat, it's fine. I see Sharon. Please.
Hello, Sharon. Welcome.
Yes, kia ora. Just greetings from Aotearoa, New Zealand. All that you've said. I've been involved with Clearwater Bahá'ís because I'm remote and I wanted to connect to other, of course, Native Americans or the tribes in America, because the Guardian gave New Zealand a mandate, Aotearoa, in regards to First Nations peoples here and in Australia, and that's been my work for 40 years. So, look, I just want to thank you so much, because everything that has been stated in your talk today has uplifted my spirit, given me inspiration and courage in my lone post to keep on going forward with this. And I would really like to thank Jeremiah Adams and John Piltz, because they have had to put up with a lot from me and allowed me to adopt them. So I just wanted to say one more thing about the Maid of Heaven. Meant to be, I think that the female element in the rise of the New World Order is very predominant. It is like the balance being returned. So just a thought and greetings from tangata whenua here in Aotearoa. to everybody.
You know, sister, I made a journey to Aotearoa. Of course, I've also made journeys to our relatives there in Australia. And it was so incredible because I met with so many great Maoris. And, you know, they recounted to me that, yes, this relationship we had between us, even though there's scholars that are saying, no, this couldn't be possible, even though Thor Heyerdahl showed exactly through this balsam raft with 9 balsam logs, how they were able to, over 100 days, travel from the Americas into Tahiti, into that area. They know from their own lineage, which you all keep so well, they know that there was certainly migration coming from Asia into those areas, but also there was coming from here. And anybody that doesn't understand, the Salish people where I live, they traveled back and forth to Hawaii. There was wide traveling. We had Chinese great fleets come here prior to Columbus, came here to trade, not to colonize, to trade. We also know relatives from Africa were coming here. We also know that relatives from the Scandinavian countries came before Columbus. So there was so much interaction between us as Indigenous people across the Americas and across the Pacific, clear to Aotearoa. I'm not saying, by the way, there wasn't also relatives that came from the Asian side into Aotearoa, but also we also are directly related spiritually. So what I'm saying, this prophecy given by Abdu'l-Baha in the Tablets of the Divine Plan, also from my perspective, also equally applies to our relatives of the Pacific all the way to Aotearoa. That's what I'm saying here. Other questions or comments?
So there's actually 2 questions in waiting at the moment.
Okay.
I'm going to ask the first one that was publicly written and one that was privately written. The first one, Lucy, she says, as a South American Indigenous person myself, how can we bring more Baha'i principles to local communities in Colombia?
We work very extensively with our relatives there in Colombia. In fact, I'm invited to a gathering where all the Indigenous people of Colombia, all the different tribes are coming together and have called a meeting. I think if you'll take a look at the documents attached to the website there, especially the document, the covenant, literal covenant that we agreed to and begin building, you'll see all those teachings, principles of consultation, steps to consultation, code of ethics, international treaty to protect and restore the sacred. Back in 1982, between Christmas and New Year's, we met for 4 days and 4 nights with 40 elders that came together for the first time ever in history. And out of that began unfolding what we call 16 principles for building a sustainable, prosperous, and harmonious world. These were directly the principles now that underlie this whole movement we have going across the Americas. And others have adopted it, these principles, these guiding principles of other relatives. I call these the sacred covenant. And the sacred covenant we have, for instance, between ourselves and the white buffalo calf woman, and my dear Tahanshi, my dear cousin, Kevin Locke, who passed on the spiritual world this past year. He taught, there's a song, and I'll sing it, just one verse of it for you. So this song is the chief song of our white buffalo calf woman. It says this: friend, do it this way. So when you're preparing a pipe, it says, friend, do it this way. And I'm going to insert the spiritual meanings behind the words that he shared with me. Friend, do it this way. Whatever you do in life, you do the best you can. If you get knocked down, get up. If you get knocked down 1,000 times, get up 1,000 times. And if you do that, the grandfather, creator, your ancestors, they're going to see you. Now, here's the covenant. When one sits in the sacred hoop of the people, one must be responsible. But if you do it that way, whatever you ask for, that's exactly the way it's going to be, and that's the way you're going to proceed. Kola le chel le chu, kola le chel le chu, we le chanuki, takuya chinku ye che tuk teo, ho cho kawaji, you awe lo takeki, pixuya pakieo, le chanuki, takuya chinku ye che tuk teo. Now, the White Buffalo Catherine appeared about 950 AD, and her teachings are in her words. And I want to share this. This is something I because if you think about it, whether it be the Latter-day Saints, whether it be the prophecies in the tablets of the divine plan, whether it be the prophecies of indigenous people across the Americas, the fact that this could happen, again, there's no way, shape, or form that people would have believed such a thing in, let's say, at the beginning of the last century and through the last century. And even I can remember back in 1967, we were just totally, completely into the deep intergenerational trauma, which reflected in alcoholism, drug abuse, sexual abuse, you name it. But this quote, I love it, says, every single letter proceeding from our mouth is endowed with such regenerative power as to enable it to bring into existence a new creation, a creation the magnitude of which is inscrutable to all save God. That direct quote from the Ancient of Days, Baha'u'llah. By the way, I like the Ancient of Days because what I find, this is my perspective. I absolutely don't want to be any part of apostolization of anybody. I do not ever want to come to another human being and somehow have a feeling that somehow I'm better than them or I know more than them, and somehow what I'm saying is the thing is to make them change. That's in the Creator's hands. My thing, though, is to share the principles as we've been instructed by the Master, the equality of women and men, the balanced extremes of wealth and poverty, and so forth and so on. But we can see that all of a sudden human beings were traveling at maybe how fast a horse could go, and all of a sudden in the middle of the 18th century, around 1844, this whole development of technology goes up like a parabolic curve, and it's continuing to go up. So we know something happened. We know the power. Now, how can that be? How can it be that songs keep people going despite all the genocide that went on? How is it a little book like this, about this big, half of it that guides the foundation of the Jewish faith, and the other part, the New Testament part of the Christian faith, how could those words, that little book, so to speak, I'm not putting it down, how could that result in what unfolded, not only in Christianity, but in Islam and Buddhism? You can go to Siem Reap, for instance, in Cambodia, and you can see the incredible civilization that was brought by these teachers just through the utterance of these words that create a brand new universe, literally. Next question. Now, again, I'm not saying these are all the answers. I think there's, we know anything that's spiritual has infinite meaning. And when you think about people fighting over, it means this, it means that, it's kind of crazy.
Well, yeah, we're very happy to have the impressions of the speakers that we've including you, that we've hosted now, and we're looking forward to host, to present various viewpoints and ideas. It's allowing people here to investigate after something has stirred an inspiration that may have been latent, activated it within them to go out and search. And it's important to encourage search, discovery, investigation, and it starts by exposing people to new ideas. new perspectives, new thoughts. We have a question here, the second one I had alerted you to. The second question, it's related to conflict, actually, between the indigenous tribes throughout history. And it's multifaceted. The first question is if the indigenous Indian tribes in the Americas had different religions. Obviously, I can't ask to say what every single one of them are, but the question is about the various peoples of the Americas having different religions. And more specifically, it's been since time immemorial in the West, in the East, and I say West, including the whole world. I'm saying like West and East. It's very clear that since time immemorial, humans have engaged in conflict. I don't know of any society that has been immune from it. We are now living under the banner of this new era that we are living in, really in the most peaceful period in history, where we don't fear, the vicissitudes of life in that way, of a neighboring people coming in and pillaging and raping and all that. So we live in an amazing time today, but the question is about the past.
Yes.
So my question to you is, I understand, and from this question that's being given to me, I understand what the questioner is asking, and more importantly, the question to you to refine it is, the indigenous peoples of the past, surely they all had their own religions, and surely there was a lot of conflict. Is this what a lot of the prophecies was related to, where they were so divided, all the different tribes not really having communion with one another? Now we see it, but in the past, not so.
Well, I would say this. Obviously, there was conflict. Let's say in the Aztecs. In fact, they were warned by their sacred teacher Quetzalcoatl, who came to the Toltecs, that if you warned against human sacrifice, for instance, and said, if you do this, you will be destroyed. And sure enough, when the Aztecs came into power, even though they brought tremendous technologies and so forth and so on, that when Cortez came, he was able to get all other tribes who had been their young people have been used for human sacrifice to join him in defeating Montezuma II. Yes, there was conflicts, but nothing compared to what was going on in the other parts of Mother Earth. Nothing compared to Attila the Hun, Genghis Khan, the Romans in their tremendous genocide of indigenous peoples in Europe and on into England and so forth. All this, the oppression of the Irish people, the colonization of the Irish, it was millions perished for what was done there. But I would say this, you can go now across the Americas. You can go from here to Aotearoa, and there's a tremendous exchange going on right now. You know, in terms of the armed conflict between, we're talking about hundreds of nations. It's gone. We are now coming together. We're now uniting across the Pacific. We're reaching out across to Africa, to the indigenous people there. In Ireland, when we had the gathering in Palenque on started on March 17th through the 22nd, we had a whole delegation from Ireland that came because they want to be part of what we're doing. They agree to our 16 principles. We had a year ago last March, we went to this 4x48 run, which means by special forces. These are the top special force veterans of the United States who are healing themselves. So the run means that every 4 hours you run 4 hours. I mean, every 4 hours you run 4 miles. So at the end of 48 hours, you run 48 miles. So we brought Crazy Horse's pipe. We made peace, and they're with us. The very covenant you shall have connected here, that same covenant they also are part of. And we have others joining us. So what I'd say this, yes, there was conflict. Nothing compared to what was going on. Yes, we stole horses back and forth, and so on and so on. But what was going on here in relationship, what I see is this, that in a way, if you see our encounter, 1492, at that time, across the Americas were probably the most spiritually enlightened civilizations it ever had been. People didn't realize that. Even though, for instance, let's just go to the plains, because people somehow measure societies by how much quote unquote science they have. But the fact was that indigenous people lived, the Oceti-Sakowin, for instance, the 7 council fires of which my father's part of, or the Chickasaw Nation, of which my mother's part of, and which I'm part of. We lived without alcohol. We did not have any places for put our elders. Children were treated with love and respect. We didn't hit children. We didn't beat children. We started taking care of children in the mother's womb. We treated elders with the greatest respect. It's like my uncle Vine Deloria Jr., who probably did more writing about indigenous people than anybody in the last century. He said, any civilization will be judged how they treat those at the twilight of their lives and those at the sunrise of their lives. And we did that. We did treat our elders. Yes, not perfect. But I think what happened was when these great material forces, science, believe that science is going to do it. I might say we've been through this process of science and spirituality. You might say believing that the physical could overcome the spiritual, it can't. In the end, it cannot. And that's what we're proving. Right now, across the Americas, indigenous people are coming together and moving like never before in history. We're stronger than we've ever been. We're more united than we've ever been. And we really, like Phil Lucas, some of you may know Phil, my dear brother. We made some number of films together, Healing the Hurts, The Honor of All, Story of Alkali Lake. Healing the Hurts set off the Indian boarding school. He said to me, I always remember this, he said, Phil, the only person that can teach the person with the whip what love and forgiveness is about is the person being whipped. So you see indigenous people, and yes, you have to understand that some of our relatives are very hurt, still very hurt by what happened, especially in the residential schools. But so many are now inviting the human family to join them in our ceremonies, to join us in our wisdom, to join and to learn from other members of the human family. So I would say, yes, in the past there was conflict, but where else in the world can you find hundreds of tribes that had differences who are now coming together? And the one thing of all the ceremonies I've found across the Americas all have to do with the 4 directions, Father Sky and Mother Earth. And we find the same spiritual teachings across the Americas, the same understanding that we have a life beyond this physical world of time and space, that our ancestors are with us, that we should pray for our ancestors in the spiritual world just like they pray for us. This is why, and I think, by the way, that's why there's so many indigenous people, not so much up here in the north, because there hasn't been much of an understanding of what these prophecies are about and the role indigenous people have to play. But certainly, you can see, though, even though that is not happening, indigenous people as a whole from many different faiths are rising and uniting and coming together. That, I believe, is going to be the leadership that leads us into the lesser peace. Because if Abdu'l-Bahá's prophecy, the Tablet of the Divine Plan, are true, if we have a role to play like that in the greater peace, then why wouldn't we have a role to play in the lesser peace? Meaning that not just those that may be a member of the faith. That means indigenous people who may practice and find their spiritual strength through the Sundance or the Sweat Lodge or the Native American Church or their Christian faith, but they are coming together in unity.
Thank you for your impressions. We appreciate it. With that being said, we are just at the time to stop for today. It's about 12:30. We thank all of you who have contributed with questions and all of you who were part of the conversation and Zoom chat. We hope you all have a very beautiful weekend, the rest of it. And we're looking forward to having you all joining us next Sunday. Next Sunday at 11 a.m. we'll have another program just like this, another speaker. Tomorrow we're going to have a talk on a roadmap for a moral society. We're all going to be discovering through reading the writings together, principles and really elements of building a moral society for tomorrow, that we can all not just coexist with one another, but build something that lasts, where we rely on one another in a spirit of harmony, unity, and love. With that being said, we welcome you all for our sessions, one being tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Mondays, and the other next Sunday. We got the devotions at 10 a.m. and at 11 a.m. a session just like this with Baha'i Explorations. All of this can be viewed on www.clearwaterbaha'is.org. We welcome you, please, to look at it, and we welcome signing up and becoming a part of the thread. So again, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. We hope you have a beautiful Sunday once more. Bye-bye now.
Now, John, I'd like to thank you and Jeremiah and the Clearwater Bahá'í for doing such a wonderful program for us every Sunday, and all the work you're doing. It's just magnificent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We appreciate having you on today, Brother Phil. Thank you.
All right. Talk to you soon.